Today's show is sponsored by the ABV Barrel Shop. The ABV Barrel Shop is located in the St. Louis metro community of Arnold, Missouri, and is the world's first single barrel only liquor store. This business is owned and operated by Steve Akeley and Jim Fosnot. Head over to abvbarrelshop.com to sign up for their email and text distribution list. That way you'll know what they have in stock, what classes are coming up, and what barrel picks they have in the works. We are also sponsored by The Bar to Go. The Bar to Go offers a fully customizable carrying case that allows you to take your favorite distilled spirits or cocktail ingredients with you. Whether you're looking for yourself, a customized gift, or logo items for your business or event, The Bar to Go can help. Check them out at thebar2go.com. Use the number 2 when you type out The Bar to Go. Did you know Neely Family Distillery now ships its popular distilled spirits directly to you? To order, simply call 859-394-3258. Tell them the ABV Network sent you. And now, on to the show.
Let's drink!
Hello, this is Steve Akeley of the Bourbon Daily, and we've got a special week for you. We are having a series of interviews I did for a show called Chatting With. Chatting With was a show that I put together that featured interviews of people from the world of bourbon or my friends that were into bourbon, that type of thing. And I would go on there without any sort of questions thought out. It would just be, let's hit record and start talking and see what happens. As an interviewer, this represented the ultimate for me. The fact that you could come in and just rely on your instincts, rely on your skills to come out with an interview that makes some sense, that isn't you just scrambling around to think of questions or something like that. I think that this pushed me, this challenged me, and it was some of the most fun that I ever had. I just didn't have time to keep on with this once I kind of got the shop going and all the other things that I had going on in my life. It's something that I may revisit at some point. I love the idea of freeform interviews. These are some of my favorites. So that's why I like people like, Joe Rogan or Mark Maron or even Howard Stern, the current day Howard Stern, the way he interviews people. I like those things where it's not the press interviews where, it's for TV talk shows and stuff like that, where they give you, 7 minutes and it's all canned answers where they've rehearsed with their PR person because they know exactly what you need to ask in a very short time frame. This is like where you're just literally can ask about anything. And you're trying to find out not only about, what's going on in their life now, but what formed them as a person. So I think these are all pretty special. I've got a cool week lined out here that I think is going to be fun, kind of combines some bourbon industry stuff as well as some personal stuff, as well as getting to know some of the people on this very show. So the first one I have is Demetrius Cain. He's all over social media. He is definitely the sweetheart of the industry right now in the St. Louis area. This is before all of that broke, though. This is just Demetrius Cain, the normal guy, my friend, the guy that ultimately hasn't forgotten who he was now that he's made it big. We're still buddies. He still makes sure that me and our team and our shop gets taken care of. We get special treatment, which is pretty darn cool. The fact that he's made it, he doesn't really need to talk to us anymore at all. Our shop represents a pretty small amount of business compared to what's out there for him at this moment in time, but he still is just so unbelievably good to us. It's just good. And you'll hear my interview with him, which is a fun one. On Tuesday, we're going to be talking to Royce Neely. That's always a classic. Royce is my buddy. First time we ever did anything like this, though, where it's just a free-form interview and we just chat. On Wednesday, I think I've got a really fun one for you guys. It's my mom. So for those of you that want to know a little bit about me, I think there's no better way to learn a bit about a person than talk to, their parent or their parents. And in this case, we talked to my mom, and great insight into, what her thoughts about all this stuff are that's going on around me, and some pretty fun stuff. On Thursday and Friday, we've got special ones because I'm going to be talking to my two co-hosts. On Thursday, I'm going to talk to McNew, the person that I've been working with the longest on the network now, and then Miss Becca Sue on Friday. Should be fun as well. But for right now, we're going to kick it off the week with Mr. Demetrius Cain. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chatting With. My name is Steve Akeley, and we've got a fun show today. I've got Demetrius Cain with me from Nobleton's Distilling House. Hey, Demetrius, how you doing, man?
Good, Steve. How are you doing this morning?
Well, I'm doing good as well. Yeah. So this is going to be a fun show today because you are a fellow Missouri guy like me. So not too far. Yeah, you're kind of in the greater St. Louis metropolitan area, and you're doing some cool things, and it'll be fun to kind of talk about that. I was excited that recently you've come out with a whiskey now. I knew you back when you were just you had rum out, but now you're in the whiskey biz too, right?
Yeah. We just recently launched our 4.5-year-old Planters whiskey. Okay. It was kind of the first thing that we ever put up, and it was a long journey. I won't lie, we never talked about it for the last 4.5 years because we actually thought it was pretty bad. So it was something we were really scared about because we did all the right things as far as doing all of our preparation. We used a whole bunch of heirloom grains. We did some unconventional things, like we malted a whole bunch of them, which made us a little bit nervous on the back end. But it was something we were really proud of starting, and then we made the whiskey out of it, and it just didn't quite have the flavor I expected. Put it into barrel, and for about 2 years, we were just super nervous. Not sure where it was going. It was like you could taste the good elements of it, but it was like there was still so much it needed more time.
Right.
So once we cracked about 3 years, we were like this is going to be good. But it was a scary 3 years.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. So because we've got a lot of barrels of it, so not a lot, but we for a small distillery like us, we've got about 250 barrels.
That's not bad, man. Yeah, well, that's quite a bit.
Not bad for a small distillery. It's a lot. I know for the big guys, it's nothing, but to us, it's a huge investment.
Right. Yeah. Beam spills that much each day. So, Exactly. Amazing to think about. So tell us a little bit about where you are in Missouri. And of course, our audience, knows me, St. Louis guy. So in perspective from St. Louis, if you're starting out in St. Louis, how do you get to you?
Yeah. So we are out, we're in Warren County. Mm-hmm. So we are about 50 minutes outside of the city. We're in a small town called Marthasville, Missouri. Yeah. So the easiest way coming straight out of St. Louis is you go down Highway 44.
Yep.
Get off at Highway 100, go into Washington, Missouri, and then you hit Highway 47 right there, pretty much at the first major light intersection. It's Highway 147. Take 47, and 47 comes across the river, the Missouri River, and then you just kind of come down through the valleys, and we're 10 miles, about 10 minutes outside of Washington.
10 minutes outside of Washington. Very cool.
So, yeah.
And by the way, Washington's a fun town. So if you're coming to visit, plan to have lunch or something in Washington, it's a cool place for sure.
Yeah, there's some fantastic restaurants. I'm trying to think of the name of it. There's a lot of really good restaurants right there on the riverfront. And most of them, it's kind of cool because most of them are either locally owned right there in Washington, mm-hmm. or they're St. Louis specific chain. So we have Sugar Fire.
Right.
That's the one chain that's there, but it's St. Louis really a chain because it's St. Louis.
It's, local chain, not
exactly
national chain or anything like that. So where did you grow up? Did you grow up in that area or somewhere else?
No, so I actually grew up in between Northern Oregon and Reno, Nevada. So I was kind of in between the two places. My parents lived in Reno, Nevada, and then my grandparents had a large farm. Primarily focusing in cattle and then some cereal grains like corn, corn and wheat, a little bit of barley sometimes, more as a cover crop. And they had their farm in a small place called Imnaha, Oregon. It's northeastern tip of Oregon. And so I spent kind of a split childhood between the two, about half the year working on the farm, half the year going to school. So, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you end up here then? This is got to be a crazy story, right? So you're all the way on the West Coast area, and then you make it all the way into the Midwest, and kind of not even in the big city like St. Louis. Not like you came for a corporate job and you're working. Yeah. No. So tell us how this worked out.
Yeah. So it actually kind of started with sports. So growing up in a really small town. I realized, if I wanted to go to college, it was, I grew up as a logger, farmer, welder. It wasn't like there was a lot of money sitting there just to go to college. So I decided, I was like, okay, how do I get to, how do I afford an education? And it was about that time that I ended up going into, because at the time I was homeschooled, and I went to a public high school, and, I think we were doing some sort of, it was like testing or something like that, like placement testing. And one of the football coaches was like, good Lord, like, why aren't you playing sports? And I was a junior at that time in high school. And I was like, well, I've never played any, I played some sports, but I'm a farm kid. I work year round pretty much on the farm. So I don't really have a lot of time. And he was like, well, would you be willing to try out? And I was like, well, does football pay for college? He was like, there's a lot of scholarships out there. And it was a good sized high school.
Okay.
And so I ended up walking on the team, and then I ended up playing for 2 years in high school, did really well.
What position were you?
So not based upon what I look like now, but I was an offensive left tackle.
Okay.
So I was, I had a lot more weight and a lot more muscle as well. And I'm not a small guy now.
But you're not built like an NFL lineman.
No, I'm more of a tight end. I look more like a tight end.
Yeah.
But I was much bigger at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started playing, did really well, got offered a full ride scholarship to come out to Kansas. Came out and played football. And then that's what kind of paid for my education. Met my wife. She's from the St. Louis area.
Yeah.
And at the time we didn't date or anything. We both went our separate ways. I got into corporate banking and, finance and agriculture. And that was kind of like that's what I did for, about 5 years. And 5-6 years, I just really didn't like it. Yeah. And I wanted to get back to farming. And then at that point I kind of ended up running into my now wife for a second time, kind of just randomly through work. And that was kind of like what reunited us, and she's from this area. And so her family has strong agricultural ties here. And so if you come out into the area, it's like her cousins and second cousins and their families, like they're German. They're like the old German families of the area.
Right.
So they've been here for, a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
And so we moved. So when I ended up moving here, that's what it was, kind of focused on getting back into agriculture. Distilling has always kind of been in my blood. We've always kind of just been farm distillers.
Okay.
And so like my family grows our sugar cane that we make rum from. Like it's extended family, but they grow it down in Louisiana. That's where my family came in,
cool.
Back in the 1900s. Yeah. So our family grows the sugar cane, and then, and so my whole idea was like, how do we build these farm distilleries? And
what do they grow the sugar cane for, by the way? What do they use it for?
The sugar industry.
I didn't think there's any like U.S. sugar cane left, other than small pockets that are used for specific products. But you're saying they're still. It's
like still a pretty large. Okay. Yeah, so it's a pretty large.
I had no idea.
So my family, we've got.
I think they all closed down. Like all the Florida ones, all closed down.
A lot of the Florida shut down. My family is one of the. We're pretty large.
Okay.
But we bought the farm in 1905.
Yeah.
So it's not. So we haven't been there for a long time.
Yeah.
Like a long time in standards of some of the agriculture in the area.
Sure.
But so our farm's 45 minutes south, about 45, 50 minutes south of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's in St. John's Parish. So it's kind of, they don't have counties there. They call them parishes. So, but that's where we have our sugar mill, and that's where all of our sugar cane comes from. I think it's very superior. I think the sugar cane there is just phenomenal. And so, so I kind of grew up like with the knowledge of that. And in my family in Northern Oregon, we had fruit orchards. And so we made a lot of brandy. and then we'd make, whiskeys with different, it was a lot more like focused on the beer side of it.
Yeah.
We'd make home, kind of barley wines, or like beer wine. And then we'd mix in fruit, do all different kinds of weird stuff. But it was just kind of focused on, we were so remote that you kind of had to make some of your own stuff sometimes. Yeah. So I grew up around it. And so I always knew I wanted to get into the industry. And then this kind of led down the path of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. That is unbelievable to me that, sugar industry. And is that on your label? Is there like a little American flag, probably grown into?
We should have that.
Yeah, it should. It's cool, man. You should be making a sugar shine too. That should be another thing that you guys make based on using the family sugar. I mean, that's
awesome, so it's really cool. Actually, I think we're one of the only brands that is actually 100% American made in everything we do. Yeah. So actually our bottles are American made. They're made out of recycled glass that's made right here in the United States. Our labels are American made. Corks are American made. And then all of our grain is
that means something, man. That means something. That's important these days.
Yeah. It was funny because we started out, because I'm blue collar. I grew up, working my whole life.
Right.
And one of the reasons why we did it that way was because, I support American jobs. It's really important to me.
Yeah.
That's one side of it. And the other side was, I was like, I'm always worried about importing stuff. I'm like, what happens if something gets stuck in customs or,
We've seen it this past year.
And then past year, everybody's calling me for glass.
Right,
I'm like, what do you mean you don't have glass? And they're like, everybody's out. And so we ended up selling like a bunch of our inventory because people needed help. And so we were trying to help people out. But it was kind of funny because, out of the blue, we didn't have issues with glass because all of our stuff's already here.
Yeah.
Now it's more expensive. I think that we pay about 40% more than everybody else in comparison. But that to me, that's
sleep
okay.
at night. Yeah, you can sleep at night because you're going to get it. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
All right. This is a podcast, so it's not a visual medium. But you've got a heck of a beard, and For the audience, I would say it's ZZ Top style. A lot of people say to me, you got a ZZ Top beard. And I really don't. It's really just growth on from the chin and the sides. I have a beard, but I trim that way back. I always keep that pretty, cropped pretty close. That's not ZZ Top style. That's not what they did. Yours would be more along the style of what would be called a ZZ Top beard. Just listening. So tell me about how did this get started? Was this at eight? If I were to look back at some old photos, there's you with that beard working on the farm.
So I've had facial hair since I was, 16 or 17, but it wasn't like a beard like this.
Right.
It was, everybody's had a little bit of facial hair. I could grow a little bit of a chin strap, and it was I look back at pictures now and I laugh. But so I went through college with this kind of, this like close cut, really stylish style beard.
Okay.
And then when I got into banking and finance, facial hair was like non-existent. You weren't allowed to have facial hair. And I come from a military family as well, where, my grandfather fought in World War II. My great grandfather fought in World War I. My older brother is Air Force, he's a captain in the Air Force. I've got, everybody in my family is associated with military. And so it was just always kind of the standard of keeping very clean shaved, like very close cut, regimented, all this stuff. And then I got into banking. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then as I left that banking world, I got into the startup world, and it was still kind of that, but it was starting to push the envelope a little bit.
Right.
And that's when I started growing the beard. I took some time off in between different jobs when I was kind of tinkering with the idea of starting this, and I ended up letting my beard go for like 6 months. And then I was like, you know what? I'm done. So then I just let it go, and I haven't trimmed it. I think I trimmed it a little bit in like 2 years ago, but it's like down past the chest. Right. And I don't do the sides at all.
Yeah.
I don't know if my wife likes it. Every time it comes up in conversation, it's one of those like, I'm like, look at how long the beard is. And she's like, no, I'm aware.
Right.
And I'm like, and then you just have to shift topic and you just move in a different direction really quickly.
Exactly. Every once in a while, I like having a beard, but every once in a while, there's that embarrassing thing when you see a beard hair. And one of those beard hairs, like I'm at Royce Neely's house. Of course, mine's got the gray in there. And I look down and there's like this gray hair. And of course, my beard's very wavy. It's got this wavy, long gray hair. And I see it on the floor. I got to run over there and grab it. So hopefully nobody saw, that's the only downside, I'd say. A little shedding from time to time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the shedding. Also, when you're walking in a stiff wind, and like my beard flies up and over the head,
yes.
And
look like Cousin It at that point.
Oh yeah, and people look at me and they're like, "Does that ever annoy you?" And I'm like, "You just got to part the way, just part it out of the face."
Right.
Every so often, I ride motorcycles or stuff like that, and it's like I'll get off, and it's like I've got these like almost like Viking horns out the back of my shoulders, and like trying to tame that back.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are downsides, but yeah, I haven't.
It's better than shaving every day. Yeah, it's better than shaving every day. There's no
exactly.
Fun. I don't like that at all. So yeah,
I got tired of paying for all those high prices.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a waste of money. So yeah, this is better. So tell us how you get going with the distillery. So when's like the first time you thought, man? And I know you have a distilling background, so that doesn't play to this, but just like when I think I'd like to open a distillery and walk us through that process. How does it then come together?
Yeah. So for me, it took about 5 years for it to come together from the first thought of it to actually, starting the licensing, to which founded just Nobleton's. So for me, I started with this idea. My family had been around rum. I had been around rum. And so I can't tell you the number of names I went through. I had hilarious, ridiculous names for the distillery. And so I kind of went through like the whole process, but then it's changed from just being this cool idea to actually running the numbers. So I started looking at the numbers. How big do I need to be in order to make it viable? Could we start out of the hobby still work a full-time job, which is what I did. And so, from the beginning of the idea for the name and then like actually coming to the point of it becoming like okay, I need to start running the numbers. That was about 6 months. It started, I had a good friend of mine. He and I both kind of did a lot of hobby stuff together. Like brewing beer and making wine. And we'd kind of gotten to that point where it was like, that was making us bored. We were tired of making beer together. We were tired of making wine together. And one night we're sitting there drinking some wine that we had made that was quite good. And we're sitting there and he was like, you know how to distill, right? And I was like, yeah, my uncle's, and he started asking, like, why don't you open a distillery? And that was like, and I was sitting there and I was like, well, it's really expensive. It's very cost prohibitive. And he was like, yeah, but you built all of our brewing equipment. He's like, you know how to weld, you know how to do all the stainless, the metal fabrication. He's like, our brewing pot is 35 gallons. You built it. Why couldn't you build it still the same size? And so that's really when it started the ticking in my head of like, okay, there's a point. Now, does that mean definitively that it will work? I don't know, but I wanted to run the numbers to see, because I wasn't like, I enjoyed making beer, I enjoyed making wine, but I knew that it wasn't something I wanted. It wasn't like I loved it. I enjoy that aspect of it, but I like the whole process of distilling. And so that was what started it. I started running through the numbers and I started looking at like that kind of viability scale of how much do I need to be able to produce a week? How small can we go to start? And kind of like the conclusion I came to is that I needed to wait until I retired. Like that was kind of in my mind. I was like, okay, I need to work a good long career.
Yeah.
I can build a lot of the equipment myself, but it's going to be really, really hard to run it at the capacity that I need it to run at to be able to make money. And so then I kind of just like tucked away the idea, all the financials I had worked up on it. And I kept kind of mulling it around in my head. but I also hadn't figured out, to me, I'm a visual learner. I'm a very visual person. So I'm a visual learner, and I hadn't come up with the name. Like, the name didn't feel right to me. So it was really hard to latch onto the idea until the name was there. So it was about another 2 years of brainstorming, just thinking through, while I'm working my day job. And, I got married, had my first daughter, and one night my wife and I were sitting there in the living room, little one's asleep, and she had been going through stuff, and she ended up finding a business plan for the distillery. And we had never even really talked about it. And she was like, "You want to own a distillery?" And I was like, "Yeah, I find it really fascinating. My wife's a biochemist."
Okay. Yeah.
And so she has a huge interest in, the biology and the chemistry of the entire process. And she's like, "I love distilling in college." Like the different stuff that, biochemists will work through. It's not like they're making alcohol, but they're making chemicals and they're doing this stuff. And so we got to talking about it. And she was like, "Well, why don't you do it?" And I was like, "Well, it doesn't make sense. You have to have this big a scale in order to pay the bills. You need to have this big a distribution reach in order to pay the bills." And she was like, "Well, why do you need to do it full time? What if you just distilled bottles in the evening?" Started messing around with that. And that was like the first time I don't know why up until that point, I had never thought, why not just do it at night? A lot of people have two jobs.
Right.
But there was just I had never thought of it. And so that was really when I kind of came back to it in earnest of kind of thinking through the names. And our name Nobleton's comes from kind of like a reflection of a toast that was given from my older brother at our wedding. And he said, and it's not the exact wording he said, but he alluded to, he was like, and here's to the noble character of those we keep, the people we have around us. And it just kind of stuck with me. And that was where Nobleton's came from. It's it's not about me. It's about the we. It's who we are as a people, who we are as a group.
Yeah.
If we can make good spirits to bring people together, that they can enjoy it together, and so that's where Nobleton's actually comes from.
Okay. Cool.
And so and then I kind of happened upon the name. And then everything just kind of clicked for me, where I started building the equipment. And we really bootstrapped it. I would work my 8 to 5 job. We lived out on our farm, which is an hour outside of St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And that's where we started the distillery. So I would drive into work, I'd get there by 8 o'clock in the morning. I would get home by 6, have dinner, and then I would usually distill until about 2 or 3 a.m.
Wow.
Sleeping in front of the still and, to keep monitoring it and stuff like that. And I would sleep in front of it, get up early in the morning, do it again all week long. And that's what we did to really get started. And I worked a full-time job for about a year and a half to get it started.
Wow.
And then we started releasing our unaged spirits. And then that kind of started to get us traction. And it was a process. It was definitely a process because we self-funded the entire project. So it wasn't, we didn't have outside investors. We didn't have,
and then as money comes in, how much do you retain? How much do you put back into the business? It's got to be difficult because you're still, there's so much more you needed to do. So I would assume a bulk of it's got to go back in.
So up until this fall was the first, I'd never taken a paycheck. So I'd been working full time for the business, for 4 years. Yeah. 4 years before I ever pulled a paycheck. And even still, it's how it is running a small business.
Right.
It's, you're doing it for the passion. You're not here every day for a paycheck. It's focused so heavily on the love of the craft, the love of, it's just why do I come in every day at, 4:15 to 5:15 every morning? Not because, I would never go into another job and work 12 hours willingly, but I would do this in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And I just, and I love the agricultural side of our distillery because we're not just, buying the cheapest grain or the cheapest fruit or the cheapest sugar cane on the market. We actually grow it, and so we know the quality of it. And so there's like, right now it's like the last 2 days, our orchard, we've been grafting all of our trees, and we've got, I think it's 2,000 whips that we're grafting onto rootstock. And that means, we're clipping the trees, we're putting the grafts together, and we're doing all of that just to prepare trees for the next 5 years.
Wow.
And that's, there's like that element of not only are we putting spirits into barrels and letting them set for years, we also have to continue to prepare the soil and keep that healthy. And we have to make sure that, we're controlling the disease in our fields and, looking at erosion and the soil patterns and all the stuff that I don't think a lot of distilleries do. I think more wineries typically do that.
Right.
And that's fun, to me at least.
Yeah. Hey, this is Steve, and you're enjoying our special Chatting with week of the Bourbon Daily. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Let's talk about the people who make these shows happen. First up is the ABV Barrel Shop. It is the most unique shopping experience in the world of bourbon, as the ABV Barrel Shop only sells single barrels. Owners Steve Akeley and Jim Fosnot select. With over 100 distilleries on board to sell us barrels, we are home to the most unique and diverse barrel pick selections in the bourbon world. By signing up for our email, you will always know what we have in stock. In addition to the single barrels, we'll have a gift shop featuring ABV Barrel Shop as well as ABV Network merchandise. We are partnering with vendors like Art Eatables and Old Man Bay Signs to bring you unique items you can't find anywhere else. We will also have a 24-seat classroom where we are offering educational and fun classes like Breakfast and Bourbon, a series where we pair donuts and bourbon, customer barrel picks, and opportunities to learn from master distillers and other bourbon dignitaries. Best of all, we feature a tasting bar where you can try before you buy. All of this is located in the St. Louis metro community of Arnold, Missouri. If you are in the St. Louis area, please stop by to say hi. If you're traveling in from outside the area, please take advantage of our hotel rates with the Drury Inn and Pear Tree Inn, less than a mile from our shop. This can be done via the links in our Visit St. Louis section on our website. Head over to abvbarrelshop.com to plan your trip. The ABV Barrel Shop. It's where single barrels live. Hi, this is Steve Akeley, owner of the ABV Network. We're sponsored by the Stave and Thief Society. This is where you, a bourbon enthusiast, can expand your knowledge and emerge a bourbon steward. In 2017, I completed my Executive Bourbon Steward certification. It's the most comprehensive bourbon certification program available and connects you with an expansive network of bourbon enthusiasts and professionals. Check out the full listing of in-person and online certifications and join the society today by enrolling at staveandthief.com. Okay, let's talk about the Neely Family Distillery. In 2018, I met Royce Neely at an industry event. He started appearing on our shows, and we became friends during my frequent trips to Kentucky. Today, he is amongst the leaders of young distillers leaving their mark on the bourbon industry. A visit to Neely Family Distillery yields insight on their unique family history, why their products are special, and gives you the opportunity to taste their whiskey, moonshine, and creams. Check them out at NeelyFamilyDistillery.com or visit them in Sparta, Kentucky.
This is Mr. Bill. You're listening to the Bourbon Daily. I don't drink to that.
Yeah. What kind of student were you, because all the stuff you're talking about now sounds very science focused, smart, like a smart kid. So I assume you were a studious one, I guess, huh?
Well, I was studious, but I wouldn't say that I was a smart kid. So I'm dyslexic.
Uh-huh.
And so typically when you're dyslexic, it lends itself to an interesting way of retaining knowledge.
Right.
And so I would say that, I was really, really good at school up until I graduated high school.
Mm-hmm.
But that was because I had a lot of one-on-one, it's like I was home taught for, most of my years. And then the last 2 years of high school, so I could have graduated early. So I could have graduated high school early. So it was pretty much the last 2 years of high school. I worked a full-time job and took minimal credits just to play football so I can get a scholarship to go to college. And So then when I got to college, it was a very different learning style. And so I struggled a lot in college. And I also think it's my learning, the way that I learn. I like to be hands-on. I learn a lot from seeing it done. And like, I love science. I love, I have I've spent a lot of time working with plants in the agrarian sciences. So there's a lot of stuff but it's more of, I retain the knowledge once I've done it. You can give me a book and I can read it 3 or 4 times and I'll retain some things, but once I go do it, I've got it.
Yeah. So as a small business owner and, a family man and all that stuff, do you ever get to get away from work, or is it just, that's not even in the cards right now? Because you do run a small business and there's no way you can get away.
So it's fun. I think it depends on who you ask.
Okay.
In my mind, I get away a lot. I take Sundays off every week.
Yeah, so, sure. It's crazy.
In my mind, and it's not like the whole day. I'm not like really, flaunting that I get a day off. But, most Sundays I take off most of the day, or at least my wife has kind of a thing where it's like on Sundays, as long as I'm home by the time she wakes up in the morning. And so she doesn't sleep in, she's up by 7 o'clock. So I know that if I have to get something done, I can be here at like 2 or 3 in the morning and work until like 6 and get home. But so it depends on who you ask. To me, having a Sunday off where I don't have to work at the distillery and I can work on the farm, that's great, because we also have dairy cows and we've got, we actually have like a very large farm as well, because we grow some of the materials for our own whiskey and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
So working the farm is also another job, but so I would say I don't get away a lot. But I also don't notice it. It's not until my wife brings up like, hey, we haven't taken a vacation in like 7 years. And that's when I like notice, like, oh, you've got a point there. I thought Sundays were a vacation, but not to everybody. Right.
So no chance of getting away in the future. No, like heading to the beach or anything like that.
Not at the moment. Every so often we go down to Louisiana. We'll get time to like step away for a day or two, like in between harvests and, shipping back up here to process.
Yeah.
So we hit the beach down there, but it's kind of, I love doing this.
Yeah.
And to me, coming into work every day seems like a vacation, even though it's a lot of work. So, but yeah, not definitively, like I'm not going to become a globetrotter anytime soon.
Okay.
Start visiting Europe.
Yeah. Do you still have relatives out west, in Oregon or the Reno area? You do?
Yep.
So do they come visit you, or do you ever get the chance to go see them?
Yeah. So I made it out to Reno this past fall.
Okay.
My little brother got married. And
Gotcha. Yeah.
So my little brother was getting married, and so I got out there, and I miss the mountains. I would love to say that the Midwest has everything that's just as comparable, but you step foot into Lake Tahoe and it's just breathtaking. So I miss the mountains tremendously, and I'm an outdoorsman. I love hunting and fishing, and not that you can't do that here. There's just a different style. I always like laugh at the way that people hunt here. It's more of sitting in a deer stand with a cooler of beer.
Yes.
And when I grew up hunting, it was like you're hiking, looking for the deer, looking for patterns, like trails. You're looking, you're listening, and drinking is never a part of that type of hunting, or you get lost, and like it ends very tragically if you're doing it the way that I grew up. And here, the first time I came hunting, it was like I got all ready to go. I had my hiking boots on. I had my camo with my high vis vest, and I like show up at my buddy's house, and he was like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And I was like, I thought we were going hunting. He's like, yeah, I've got a heated and air conditioned like deer stand.
Right.
And we've got a cooler of beer and a grill inside.
Yeah.
And,
by the way, we have a salt lick where we know that and we got trail cams. We know the deer come here every day at 4 a.m. It's really, it's not really hunting at all.
Yeah. I was like, so what do we do? And he's like, well, we sit and drink beer.
Yeah.
We play cards while somebody watches. And I was like, this is very different. Now, I'm not opposed to it. I've never said that I'm opposed to, eating food and drinking beer, but it was a very different, like it really caught me off guard.
Yeah. Because you're talking about going and hiking out in the middle of the wilderness. Like my buddy will show me, here's pictures. This is the one that I want to bag this year. Look at this thing. This is the deer I'm going to get. So he's got the trail cam and all this stuff, and he's planning on the specific deer that he's wanting to shoot. So that's weird to me. It was crazy.
It was the most bizarre thing because when I grew up hunting, my grandfather, I remember when he was up into his 80s, we would wake up at like 3 a.m. and it was like a religion. You're like putting on your stuff. You have this special, like it was like deer urine and like bear scent stuff. And it was like, everybody has their secret like smell. And now looking back and I'm like, man, we were spraying this stuff on ourselves. Yeah. But like, my grandpa would be like, this is what we use so the deer can't smell us. And it was like a religion. And then we'd go up and my grandpa, he'd get out of the truck and, this is a man that's, and we'd hike for like 10 miles. And the amateur would shoot the deer. It's like the only place you'd find the deer is never near to the truck. It was always like 10 miles away. And then you had to like quarter it up and pack it back out.
Yeah.
And there's wolves out there. There's mountain lions, and sometimes you would have something tracking you and you would have to leave some of the animal in order to get away. That's what I grew up hunting.
Right.
And so it was the
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Very different.
You're being hunted as you're hunting. So very different than being up in a stand, especially air conditioned and heated one. Wow. That's the ultimate there.
Yeah. It is. And I still hunt. My buddy still has all of it. And it's hilarious. Because I've gotten spoiled now because like now my brothers like send me pictures. They're like, hey, I'm out hunting. Or my sister's an amazing outdoorsman. She hunts up in Wyoming. She actually shot a mountain lion with a bow a few years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. She's better than all of us at it. But when I send her, she's like, sends me pictures. She's like, oh, we're out hunting. We're calling in bull elks today. And I'm just like, hey, I'm sitting here in a heated and cooled, 75 degrees outside and we're in air conditioning.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got Sundays off. What do you like to do when you're? And I'm talking about stuff. I know that there's so much that goes into what you're doing. You probably continue to read and learn and educate yourself. That never stops. But when you're not doing anything with the world of distilling, what are some things that you enjoy doing? So and this will sound funny, but I'm a gardener. Yeah,
I love gardening. We've got about a 2-acre garden.
Yeah,
and so I love being out in there. During the summers, during the winter, I do a lot of carpentry.
Okay.
I try to learn a new skill. To me, it's like I try to learn a couple new skills every year. So this past year I was focusing on like masonry. So I was doing a lot of bricklaying. And no, we don't put any star signs, just water. Just rinse it. Sorry.
No problem.
Cleaning is still at the moment.
You got business. Your business comes first. So you're not even on here if you're not in the business. So we need you to keep going.
So so I enjoy. So I was learning how to like lay bricks because my wife wanted putting in a wood stove into the house. We've got an old farmhouse, and so I was like, I don't need to pay somebody how to do this. I can figure it out. And so taught myself how to lay bricks, and there's a few that if you look really close, there's a few that are definitely not the right way done, but you learn pretty quick how it's not supposed to be done.
Right.
So I enjoy doing stuff, keeping my hands busy. And that's just kind of the way I was raised. Yeah. It's just kind of keep moving. Don't really, the gardening to me is probably my favorite thing that I do in my, for 9 months out of the year, I'm out there weeding gardens, checking on my tomatoes, my lettuces, my garlic. Garlic is like the greatest thing ever. Mm-hmm. And you grow it during the winter. So you seed it in the fall, it grows through the winter, kind of dies back and then sprouts up in the spring and then you harvest it. And we've got like 8 or 9 varieties of garlic going right now.
Really?
And that's just, I pickle it. And we've got like a whole flock of heirloom chickens.
Yeah.
So I'll pickle like the eggs with the garlic, and it's just it's just one of those things where it's like, most people probably don't do that kind of stuff, but it's just fun to me.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question because there's not, based on your lifestyle and all the things you got going on, TV is not really a thing, but I'm sure there's something you watch. Is there a show that you watch that you're like, I will watch this? Is there something?
So you laugh. We don't even have internet in our house.
Uh-huh.
We don't have internet. We don't have TV.
Okay.
Because we've got a very, very small, like when I say we have a small farmhouse, right. Our house is 875 square feet.
Yes.
So it's
but a wild card here is the fact we're talking to a guy that was spending nights in a distillery by himself in front of the still. There's some downtime there where you may be watching some sort of TV. So there's got to be at least one show that you're like, I do like this show.
So I like different shows. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to, I enjoy sci-fi. Like there was a show that was on Amazon recently that was it's called The Expanse. Which was kind of cool. Just as kind of just out of this world kind of. And but I'm a huge podcaster.
Okay.
I love listening to podcasts. I always have headphones in. I've got speaker system all throughout the distillery. And that's actually how we ended up meeting.
Right. Yeah.
Through podcasts.
Yeah.
Because that's like what so I listen to the shows, and that's how I kind of keep up on what everybody else is doing, because I don't always have time to call other distillers, and I don't have time to, always call, keep up on what everything's going on with everybody else. And so I enjoy being able to listen. Like when I see somebody that I respect in the industry or or even outside of the industry, like when I'm like, just like there are people that I follow through their podcast, because I don't have time to sit down with a book and be reading while I'm, preparing a mash for,
But yeah, you can multitask.
Yeah.
You're plugged
so I
in
can have headphones in, or I can have something going and learn something, hear somebody's perspective, because it's amazing to me just the amount of knowledge that is shared through podcasts that, 50, 25, 30 years ago, we weren't able to do this in the way that we can now. And now it's just, I've got hundreds of, thousands of hours of information on my phone that's free.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, it's cool. It is such a great time. I mean, because it allows, because the barrier to entry is almost nothing. Get a computer and a microphone and you're in podcasting. So it allows all this people who, have expertise in different things. And there's literally, you can find any topic you want, I would assume, a podcast on at this point. So it's cool. So that's very, very neat. So yeah. And we met at I guess your rum release. So you had been listening to the show, and then you invited me to that, and that was pretty cool. That's the first time that we met. So so you're a listener to like the Bourbon Daily or the Bourbon Show, or both? Or?
Yeah. So the Bourbon Daily, the Bourbon Show, and because I just think it's fun. It's fun to just listen to what people are, talking about. It's always good to, there's a certain level of humor that comes when you're in the industry,
right?
That when you're around it all the time, it's like hearing what makes other people laugh and what keeps them engaged. Like that's always fun. And I like that side of the industry. Cause a lot of people, it's like, that aren't in the industry don't understand the jokes. And because like when I talk about collecting whiskeys, the first thing my mother says is she's like, don't become an alcoholic. And I'm like, if I was, I could kill myself because we've got way too much alcohol.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, don't worry about me. We've got enough to last like 100 years.
Yeah.
And so like that, so I listen to those, and then I listen to like a lot of entrepreneurial podcasts, because there's one that I really like. That's The Way I Built It.
Yeah,
it's fascinating. Just getting into the mind of different, entrepreneurs, because like these people have done it,
right?
So yeah.
Do you have any friends in the industry? Are there people that are there people that you are friends with in the industry?
Yeah, so I'd say that it's locally. There's a lot of craft distillers that I work with a lot. I there are some people that I have incredibly high regard for, when you're looking at like people that really have been around and really know a lot of information. For us locally, we've got, one of the people that I talk to every so often, is Adam Stump, that owns Stumpy Spirits.
Yeah.
He's just an absolute wealth of knowledge. Probably something
great guy.
I respect the heck out of what he's done and what he's doing. And then locally, we've got a bunch of other small distillers like that we help out, we work with, that we kind of like tap into when anybody needs something. We're like different size levels.
Right.
But there's a lot of information. We've got Pickney Bend that is just around the corner down here, and they have some fantastic spirits, and they work really closely. We talk a lot, see anything we need there. But outside of that, it's like, I wouldn't say that I have a ton of like big company industry friends. And that's just kind of because at the end of the day, I'm kind of a weird, nutty introvert.
Right.
And I just kind of stay in my corner and just make fun stuff, and I enjoy messing around with. And I read a lot of what people are saying more than I probably talk to them directly. But yeah.
Well, we have a kinship there. I'm definitely an introvert myself, and just because you talk for a living doesn't mean that you're super outgoing or anything like that. It's what I do. So I could do that. Now, put two people put me in the room with someone I don't know and say, "Oh, here, enjoy dinner." I can't talk to anybody. What do we got to talk about? You put me with my friends, I never stop talking though. That is the other side of it too. So
and that's the thing that's funny is it's my wife's an extrovert. Mm-hmm. And so my wife, to her, it's like what gives her energy. She's like, I want to go out with friends. We want to have date nights. And we want to do all this stuff. She's like, and then she'll take me along for it. And we'll get there and we're getting at the end of the night. And she's like, well, did you have fun? And I'm like, well, I was present. They're super nice people, but I'm exhausted. She's like, why are you exhausted?
Right. It's the opposite. Like you said, like an extrovert draws energy from being in a group. And for introverts, it does reverse that. It saps the energy out of you. I worked a corporate job, and for many years, we would have like this learning conference where, you'd have to man a booth for hours on end and just talking to one person after another. And then you go to events and you got to just talk to all these people. And I would have to get away sometimes and just be by myself. Now, my coworkers don't understand that. I'm a sales guy, and most of them are very extroverted and outgoing. But for me, I'd sneak away and go to the hotel, and go off somewhere where there's just like a couch and just sit by myself because I had to recharge the batteries, man. I can't be doing that all the time.
Yep. And then there's that awkward thing of like when people and that's the thing of like when extroverts meet introverts, and you're trying to explain to them like, no, like I need alone time to just recharge. And it's like, I've got a stump at the end of my field, at the end of my dairy, because we've got dairy cows, and I'll walk down there and I'll sit on the stump. And one day my wife thought something was wrong, and she comes walking all the way down to the end of the field to the stump.
Right.
And she's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm just being alone. I just needed to find my thoughts.
Right.
And she was like, why? It was like she thought that there was something major wrong. And I was like, no, we're great. I just we have kids. They're always here. Right. And so now it's become the joke. It's like every time I'm going out, she's like, no, is this a stump time or is this just like regular chore time, taking care of the cattle time? Or are you going to be out there for an hour or two?
Right. Yeah.
So, I get that.
Yeah, I that's why I enjoy the good old fashioned road trip, and a lot of times I do it by myself. For work, I'm driving back and forth to Kentucky or places like that, and I don't mind that at all. I don't mind being in a car alone.
Yep.
Either listening to podcasts or sometimes nothing because I'm thinking about the business and what do I need to do, and I'm sure you're the same way. You can make lists in your mind that you can pull upon later. So I do that sort of stuff. So
yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. It's kind of the same thing for me. It's funny how often. So I listen to podcasts, but then also I listen to just the silence of the car when you're thinking about business.
Yeah, and
it's funny when you get places and people will be like, well, what do you drive? Because I drive a lot for work as well. It's like in between farms. I'm driving in between, our distribution areas and, doing tastings. And when we get there, people are like, so what kind of music do you listen to? I'm like, well, I can't name a single artist. I know that there's a lot of music I like. But they're like, well, you don't listen to it while you're driving? I'm like, well, I listen to a lot more podcasts, or silence.
Right.
They're like, are you boring? And I'm like, oh, maybe. But
Right. Yeah.
Lots going on up here.
I own it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So coming up, playing sports, are you still a sports guy, or is that something that you're not into?
So I love live sports.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, it's like getting out there and seeing the Cardinals play, or, going to a hockey game. I love like the atmosphere and the energy of a live game. But you will probably never find me sitting on a couch watching a game.
Right.
And it's not that I can't admire the sports and the athleticism of athletes. It's just, it's never been my cup of tea to watch. I never grew up watching sports. I think it's kind of like how you grow up.
Right.
Being very remote in rural areas, we didn't have, for a long time, we didn't even have electricity. We put in a hydro dam, so we'd have power on the farm for like 3 hours a day. But the rest of the time we didn't have energy, like power and stuff. And now we do. They put in power eventually, I think here about 10 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
So we didn't really grow up around sports a lot. Like when I went to play sports in high school, I had never played football before in my life. I understood that there was a game called football, but I didn't even understand how it was played. Like that's how ridiculous it was for me. Wow. When I stepped on as a junior in high school and the coach was like, okay, you understand the principle. And I was like, no, I have no idea what I'm doing. And he was like, okay, well, stand here and hit that guy. And I was like, okay. And I stood there and I hit that guy. And he was like, well, you're pretty strong. And I was like, well, I'm a farm kid. And he was like, okay, well, then hit that guy. And if you knock that guy over, then hit that guy. And it was so, yeah.
Yeah. And what position again were you? Guard?
Offensive left tackle.
Offensive left tackle. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So those guys tend to be the bigger guys, and it's a little bit more stationary. Like so the guards get pulled and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I was a pulling left tackle. Okay. When I did the Nike Combine going into college, I ran a 4.40. Okay. So I could run a 40 yards in 4.4 seconds.
Wow! Holy cow! So that's fast.
I was quick.
That's wide receiver fast, actually.
Yeah. And at that time, I weighed about 315 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm tall, so it's proportional. I'm 6'5", so it's not like, and I carried a lot more muscle on me at the time. I was just bigger. And then like after I got out of college sports, I got injured. And then it was for me, it was just kind of like, then I just kind of went back to the way I used to do things, where I didn't need to be that, I'm not knocking over or trying to knock over very large people. So
yeah, exactly.
So now I just manhandle barrels, and usually they're manhandling me. So,
Very cool stuff. Well, what are your plans this year? Last question. What are your plans this year for the business? What's happening in 2022?
Yeah, so we're launching whiskeys. So we've got, Planter's whiskey hit the shelf. We've got our brandy brand is finally coming to the market. We're focusing on a lot of new spirit launches. So over the next few months, there's going to be a lot of new stuff coming out. And then we're going to start really focusing on, in the midst of all that, we're focusing on really getting a lot more people out here, educating people about our spirits, what we're doing, why we do it, really focusing more on the educational side. Mm-hmm. We love teaching. That's something where it's like, I feel is one of my stronger suits is I like showing people how to do it, because it's like, if you want to start a distillery, like we need more and more people that are passionate about this industry. I think this is an industry that, some people are like, oh, but what if you get too many? It's like, I don't think we'll ever have too many. The more you have, the more ideas you have, the more talented individuals. And that's kind of like my focus, just like, how do we educate people and like give them information so that, and if we can be a resource, then be a resource. So,
yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So if people want to come visit you, want to follow the journey, any social media, anything like that you want to share?
Yeah. So we are at Nobleton's on Instagram. And then we have all of our brands listed under Nobleton's, but Nobleton's our main page.
Okay.
Then we are at Nobleton's Distillery on Facebook.
Okay.
And then we are open. We're out here in Marthansville. Our .com is nobletons.com. So it's just quick and easy. And then we have our tasting room. We're open on Fridays and Saturdays to the public, which might change as we add more hours and more days.
So, all right. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap this one up, and we'll do it as we always do by talking about where people can find us. For me, I'm an easy guy to find. I'm at Steve Akeley on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I've got a website, steveakeley.com. We've also got a company website. That thing's abvnetwork.com. Check it out. Everything that we do is out there. Previous shows, blogs, podcasts, so much more. abvnetwork.com. Come by and see us, the ABV Barrel Shop. We are here in Arnold, Missouri, a St. Louis suburb. We'd love to show you what we've got in terms of barrel picks. You can taste before you buy here. Pretty cool. At a very minimum, sign up at abvbarrelshop.com for our email and text distribution. And please get involved with the show. Head over to patreon.com/the ABV Network and give us a 5-star review. It helps new people find the show. That's pretty darn important to us. On that note, we will let you go for today, but we'll have a brand new show for you tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Until then, take care, everybody. See ya. Peace. Before we finish the show, let's talk about some great companies that support the ABV network. First up is Moonshine Still Pro. Moonshine Still Pro has a full line of products to help the home distiller. Whether you want to experiment on the stove in your kitchen or you're looking for a bigger setup in your backyard, owner Russell Creed and his team can help. They have multiple still offerings, accessories, and even grain from their partners at Goldstone Mill to assist you in making whiskey on par with your favorite distillery. They can also help you with some fabricated parts you probably can't make yourself if you are attempting a DIY still project. Learn more or order your still or parts at moonshinestillpro.com. Last but not least is the ABV Barrel Shop. While we don't get to play in the allocated bourbon game because we aren't selling the other products you have to do to get those, we do have access via our friendships in the bourbon industry to some really cool stuff. Have you ever seen your favorite craft distiller selling some really cool limited offerings only in their gift shop? I'm talking things like the Hazmat offering Distillery 291 did for their 10th anniversary, or Neely Family Distillery's Papaw's birthday barrel. They don't have enough of it to send it out to distributors, so they only sell it via their gift shop. Well, companies like Distillery 291 and Neely Family Distillery have agreed to sell us 2 or 3 cases of these offerings moving forward, meaning our store will have the access to some of the rarest whiskeys in the world. Way more difficult to come by than the allocated bourbon offerings with a national release. Yes, they will be extremely tough to come by, but if you're a customer of our store, you'll have a chance to get them. Get signed up for our email or text list over at abvbarrelshop.com so you don't miss out.
The Bourbon Daily is part of the ABV Network. For more information or to become a sponsor, please visit abvnetwork.com. Thanks for listening and cheers.
This has been a Steve Akeley production.